This could have been a $25,000 mistake. We're bringing you all the highlights of the 2023 Grand Final of the World Series as 4 intrepid players play for $25,000. But again, he lucks into a perfect card for his gems. Just an absolute monstrous draw for Andrew Law. A game of Splendor, drawn from a hat out of the 16 games. We got 4 of the greatest board gamers out there competing for the prize. Our Arc Nova champion, sitting in seat 1, Andrew Law, won the first ever Arc Nova championship, which if you participate in 2024, you're going to walk away with the first ever Arc Nova tournament map. He also won Raw in his semifinals to head into the final match. He's sitting in seat 1. In seat 2 is Jukka Otonen, hailing from Finland. Jukka is the Brass 2023 champion. This is Jukka's first appearance in WSBG, and then won Arc Nova to make it here the first time he had played that game. Scott Kushner, Papa Kush, sitting in seat 3, our Seven Wonders champion, winning a 3-player game of Seven Wonders against the designer of Arc Nova, who made the final of Seven Wonders, and then also proceeded to win Dune Imperium. And then finally in seat 4, Angela Tao, our Castles of Burgundy champion, the first time Castles of Burgundy was seen in this competition, and she has made it to the finals, winning her way by playing none other than the most complex game in the lineup, Gaia Project. Angela Tao takes seat 4 in this final match. So I want to take a first look at everyone's starting turn. This is a very important moment of the game. Your starting moves sort of define what you are going for, and it sets the tone of what people are going to watch out for. And right away, Andrew Law does something what I feel is fairly unorthodox in Splendor, and goes ahead and takes 3 different chips. But what's interesting about this play, and you'll see how it helps him over the course of the game, is that no specific set of cards requires those 3 chips. Andrew's actually spreading himself wide in this area, knowing that he can go for additional things. And this is a really interesting strategy, because normally you will reserve a card, and that is in fact what all the other 3 players around the table do. They reserve a card to get that wild gem, super flexible for down the line, and make sure that you have access to a high value card that you can then work towards. Jukka will reserve this 6 blue, requires 6 blue to complete and gets 3 points. Scott will reserve this 7 brown, which will give him 4 points, and then it will be replaced by a 7 white, which Angela immediately reserves. But I think it is a really fascinating play here, and we see that Andrew ends up going for this 1 red down here. It costs him 4 white, but he also then is starting to build his chip stack of greens and browns, and not having to sacrifice that tempo, which inevitably allows him to trigger the end game first. He is definitely supported by the cards that come out here, and supported by Jukka deciding to go for blue. He sort of sets Jukka up, saying, hey, here are the 3 gems I'm taking. What else is left? As we can see as we go ahead, Jukka reserves that 6 blue. It goes over to Scott Kushner, who thinks a little but immediately knows that he wants to reserve that 7 brown, and then a card will be flipped up, as I said, which Angela will be taking. A beautiful grab for Angela. Angela probably would have opted for this 5, this 7-3 blue, but with no blues on the board, that makes it a little bit tricky. And now, what's interesting in Splendor in these early stages is to see the chain of events where you might run up the board. You'll want to get a couple midweight cards in that middle tier, and then see how you can access those level 3 cards to get the most efficiency of your engine. Generally speaking, it is inefficient to go for that level 1, but you might need it to bulk out your purchasing potential. But I think it's really interesting to look at the board and look at what people choose and highlight for that first move of the game. Equally important are these second moves, and I want to jump ahead to what has happened. Jukka has reserved a small card, a blue, to help with his blue engine to go towards that 3 blue, that 3-pointer. Scott Kushner has taken gems, taken a brown, a red, and a green, telegraphing that Scott might be interested in going for this white gem, although By all accounts, Scott should probably be interested in going for this brown gem right here, it being worth 2 points and it going towards his 7 brown. Angela makes another clutch reserve, and this is better than Yuka's positioning because this one has points. Angela goes and reserves this card right here, requiring 3 green, 2 red, and 2 brown to complete, and this will start Angela's dominance in white. And I think seeing the board, seeing that Angela got that 7 white early, and seeing that there's the 7-3 5-pointer of white, people should be scared of this move. People should have put Angela on their radar as that happens. We also see Andrew really get lucky here with the distribution of the cards that come up. 2 cards have now left row number 2, and you see him go and start to really make a monopoly on green. He has diversified, you know he wants to go for the white down there, and he has the flexibility now to grab those greens, make sure he has 4, and having the 5 and the 6 green out front, even though there are no more wild chips to reserve. Again, a crucial play from Angela being that she reserves the last wild chip, and that's going to be a story of this match, is who is holding on to the wild chips and what it causes people to do, reserving things and not getting benefit for themselves, but being forced to reserve as defensive plays, giving people flexibility. Scott again goes for this a little bit of a defensive play as well, just garnering some browns, reds, and greens, even though Angela has the chip that he wants. Scott knowing that he can pick up that blue at any time because nobody else is picking up blue, and choosing then to prioritize the gems that are hot commodities, the gems that he might need later, because this one, which would fit well with Scott, is only requires 1 blue. And Scott obviously hoping for a wild to be put back into the pot before he pulls the trigger. The thing about Splendor is that it's all about that timing factor. It's all about figuring out the flow of the players, and will they hold on to the gems that you need, or will they put them back into that pot? And that can be a severe miscalculation if you think the gems that you need are going back into the pot and then they aren't, and you are stuck with nothing left to do on your turn but do a reserve and a denial play. I also want to point out the number 1 card that everybody manages to produce around this table, which inexplicably ends up being a level 1 card. You don't see a lot of level 1 cards, but all of these players choosing to invest in that early potential rather than go straight for the jugular. Andrew here is again targeting becoming an early threat in Splendor, which also can be dangerous. If there's one player around the table in Splendor that people feel afraid of and they'll work together and be focused on, there's a more likely chance of denial happening to that player rather than blending in and then making a strike later on. Andrew with a really clean opening play though, diversifying himself, getting that 1 point in the red and then the 2 points in the green, and then letting that engine expand from there. The obvious targets for Andrew would be to get his 3 green and run up the green ladder, hoping to hit this number 7 3 green up top, especially with this bottom row getting blocked out with the brown chips. But unfortunately, this is where Andrew's planning sort of falters, but again, he lucks into a perfect card for his gems. Just an absolute monstrous draw for Andrew Law. And let's see if the players going around the table will choose to deny that. The only one who I think could might be Yuka, who has those gems in his disposal, but Andrew's already well on his way to developing that green engine, potentially capitalizing on that 3 green and then running up the track unless he is impeded by someone. And this is where hoarding the wild gems becomes a bit dangerous, because if you don't incentivize somebody else to reserve cards, just to reserve a card to get that wild gem, they might not do it. And in a 4-player game of Splendor, you need to have people denying each other and consistently denying each other so that you can move up ahead. Hopefully they're not denying you, but you absolutely want that to happen. Scott Kushner, as you can see, building up towards that level 2, the 2 brown, which for sure he'll purchase on his next turn. But a really, really strong start for Andrew Law. And here's where that denial play comes in. This is actually a huge hit to Andrew. Scott Kushner managing to snag, was going for that brown, but then decided, you know what? Andrew is too scary a competitor, if I let him get that green, there is no way that he's not just going to run rampant with that game. And I think it's absolutely the correct choice from Scott. He picks up a cool 3 points and is able to do that denial. And then you see that reaction from Andrew right as Scott does this. We have a little cut to Andrew. As he picks it up, Andrew just ever so subtly ends up shifting in his chair, putting his head on his hand, leaning in forward, knowing that he has been disrupted. What you'll also see is the most valuable level 2 cards are the ones that are 3 points. And generally these require 6 gems of a single color, and you see those cards get snapped up instantly. They don't stay around because people know it is the best value for that level 2 row. For only 6 gems, and especially if you have a little bit of an engine to help you out there, you can get to 20% of your final score. This mid game is a very good mid game. Everybody feels like they're playing correct denial plays. They're all jostling for the middle section. Angela is forced to spend 3 wild gems to capitalize getting that brown down there that she reserves. That puts the wild gems back into the pot, which people scoop up to, again, reserve their cards. This is the flow of Splendor, or higher level Splendor, is when players have that flow of reserving and keeping that balance so that they never have 3 reserved in their stack unless they really need it, or they're going to be completing one of them on the next turn. Pretty much if you see somebody with 3 reserved cards, they've either made a mistake or they're about to complete that in 1 or 2 turns. Here's a moment that I find very exciting about Scott's game. You'll see here that Yuka is about to reserve the 5 blue, 3 green on the right end of the second tier, and that will reveal a card that costs 5 brown. Now Scott has 7 brown because of course he has saved up those 7 to get the card that he reserved at the very beginning of the game, but with nobody having brown in their stack, Scott immediately makes the snap call to grab that extra 2 points, knowing that he can take his 2 brown back, putting it back so that he's only 1 turn away from his completing his 4-pointer again and finding that flow. And what I think is really neat about these players is that they're opting to complete their larger point value in the middle of their game. Scott is sitting at 5 points right now. He's going to get a 4-pointer to put him at 9. Angela is sitting at 6 points. She's going to get a 4-pointer to put her at 10. Oftentimes players make the mistake to hold on to these cards at the big showy finale and try to build up to them. But if you can get that card, that one-off card, you know you have those large points locked in, then the option becomes get another large point or pick around in the middle of the pack for a little bit. And by that time, by mid-game, you've already established at least enough of a baseline that you have the flexibility of which mid-game cards to go for. And so getting that large card at the midway point of the game is very effective because it gives you that flexibility. You see the patterns, you see the end game that is in sight, and that is what both Scott and Angela go for. Scott also recognizing that there are no real brown options on the board and people don't want the brown chips, and he's able then just to take both back and then repeat. It's a lovely, lovely maneuver by Scott, and showing the importance of not getting tunnel visioned as he puts those 2 black or 2 brown chips right back into his stack. Angela, again, focusing on building that diamond engine, knowing that she can turn that diamond into a point and then easily throw her 7 diamonds back down. She has the flexibility to use that wild gem, and then it activates her 7 cost white as well and puts both in her and Scott into a pretty dominant position. But I really also love Andrew's play. Andrew has played a very methodical game of Splendor. It's a game of Splendor that I love watching and I love playing myself. It's just going for that middle ground, chipping away at those points, keep plugging along, but eventually something has to give. And if you have players who are locking down those 4 and those 5 points, just getting there with those 2 points may not be enough. And in fact, Andrew does still manage to get to 15 first and trigger the end game, but because he doesn't have those larger point value, he inherently has more cards and therefore is eliminated by the tiebreaker later on. But still, just really phenomenal play, really methodical, diligent play from Andrew and from everybody around the table. Finally, we have this wild move that happens late game because we're going to see 2 reserves without people taking chips. So Scott Kushner, across from Andrew Law, knows that if Andrew Law gets this 4-pointer that he's about to reserve, he will win the game. And Scott Kushner decides to reserve that card because he also sees that Angela is within striking distance of that. Scott sees that both Angela and Andrew have the possibility to target this card and decides to make this reserve as this denial play. And here's a play which I think is a real misplay from Angela. I think Angela could get to 15 one turn sooner than she does. And so she either uses this as a stalling tactic, but in Splendor, you don't really want to stall. The only reason Angela doesn't buy this right now is because she's worried about giving Andrew one additional wild chip. Or she still has her head and in her head that Andrew can reserve that one that Scott just took off the playing board. It's a card that Angela purchases right on her next turn. And looking at this back, I think she went to reserve a wild gem and then wasn't able to do so and had already taken the turn. That's the only reason why she reserved it, was hoping to get that additional wild gem when she could have just spent the wild gem she had and then turned it around. This could have been a $25,000 mistake, but Angela is still luckily one turn ahead in her efficiency that it doesn't matter. Andrew Law takes one additional turn to gather the gems that he needs, and it's not enough. You can see Scott Kushner, head in his hands, trying to think his way, knowing that time is slipping away from him. Angela is going to make an instant decision on her turn, just waiting patiently for that card to be passed to her. It is at this moment that she knows that she has won. Once Andrew takes those chips, she knows that Andrew isn't going to hit 15 on that turn. She knows she has 2 turns to do what she needs to do. Calm as a cucumber as Scott Kushner sweats. It's so difficult in Splendor to look back and see where that extra efficiency could have come from, but you see that instant decision from Angela, knowing that she has the card that she needs to lock it up and passes the card away. That is the clear sign that even though Andrew's going to spend his gems right now and hit that 15, when it comes around to Angela, she doesn't have to worry about defending or blocking that one card as Scott Kushner maybe hoped that she would, because she knew she had that pathway to victory beforehand. That was a card that Scott maybe wished he could have gotten his hands on, but opted to play his own card to add to that chaining and that engine because he couldn't draw any wilds from it. And cool as you can be, Angela hits that 5-3, getting to 15 as well in the most nail-biting tiebreaker ever of Splendor. This nail-biter that came down to a tie for $25,000. Angela Tao walks away with $25,000, and Andrew Law in second place with $10,000. Papa Kush taking home that $5,000 grand prize, and Yuka Otonen taking that $1,000 fourth place finish. If you want to compete, if you think you could beat these pros at Splendor or whatever game happens to be drawn in the finals, well, there still is time to get your tickets for 2024 or gear up and start your training for 2025. Put yourself as the best of the best in board gaming history, and we will see you in Vegas.